Now I would like to introduce Eric Horvitz, who will moderate our final panel discussion of the day. Eric is a technical fellow and director of Microsoft Research Labs. He pursues research on principles and applications of AI, including learning, inference, and human AI collaboration. And if there's anyone I would think of who has really looked at how to augment people using AI, Eric's been really the leader in this field for over 20 years. He's also the father of the 100-year study on artificial intelligence, which is based at Stanford and now a program under HAI, a 100-year effort to study and anticipate how artificial intelligence will affect every aspect of how people work, live, and play. I also want to recognize Eric and Microsoft Research for providing some of the very first funding for HAI, which enabled us to move forward with the planning for the Institute and supported our first seed grant program. So, Eric, over to you.
Thanks very much. Thanks, James. Well, it was a pleasure to hear from Michael, Emma, Serena, and Dorsa. Dorsa and Michael were fabulous interns at Microsoft Research with us on my team, actually. It's great to see a partnership between industry and academia to help with training and with motivating and exciting folks like that. Great intellect. Well, welcome to the session on augmenting human capabilities. There's perhaps nothing more human-centered than exploring opportunities and possibilities for harnessing AI to extend human intellect, problem-solving, and creativity. The future of humanity is one where there will be great leaps forward, springing from rich collaborations between people and AI systems. And we're already seeing quite a bit of work, much of it still in the labs, with the rich augmentation of people with AI technologies, including systems that provide complementary views, analyses, prioritizations of various kinds, predictions, and visualizations that give human beings new lenses at understanding many domains, whether it be medicine, education, and or astronomy, even to the fine arts. I have a colleague friend that's very in the arts that's fascinated by using her new tool, her new paintbrush, which is powered by a generative adversarial network, believe it or not. And there's recent work exploring how AI can endow or sit at the foundations of models of human cognition and attention, and how these models can understand in a deep way human strengths and weaknesses and provide complementary intellectual skills or manipulation skills. There are methods being developed that enable a mix of human and machine initiatives where people in AI systems work in what we often refer to on my team as a beautiful problem-solving tango where the human is the lead. So today we'll be exploring these topics with my fabulous, come on out, panelists. Russ Altman is professor of bioengineering, genetics and medicine, and biomedical data science and computer science by courtesy. He's past chairman of the bioengineering department at Stanford. He's also the associate director of HAI, or I should say HI, in the area of augmented human performance. And he's been a fabulous faculty director of the 100-year study on AI at Stanford. Beyond all this, Russ is a practicing MD. Justine Cassell is Associate Dean of Technology, Strategy, and Impact in the School of Computer Science at Carnegie Mellon University and the Director Emerita of the Human-Computer Interaction Institute. She now co-directs the Yahoo CMU InMind partnership on the future of personal assistance, and she was a founding co-director of the Simon Initiative on Technology-Enhanced Learning. I should also mention that Justine is co-founder of a nonprofit called Equal AI that addresses inequities and the challenge of inclusiveness in AI projects and efforts. Fernanda Viégas is a senior researcher at Google, which she co-leads the People Plus AI Research Initiative, and this is part of Google Brain. Her work in machine learning focuses on improving human-AI interaction with a broad goal of democratizing AI technology. Her team has open source tools for machine learning, interpretability, and fairness. She's created actual materials for use by non-experts to bring them into the fold. She's also known for her contributions to social and collaborative visualization. And I should say, we just had a fabulous research session in the green room, and we have a project.
Yes.
Bob Zhang is the co-founder and chief technology officer of Didi Xuxing, the world's leading mobile transportation platform. People thought it was Uber or Lyft, but no, it's Didi these days. Bob leads the creation and continuous development of Didi's overall product, technology, and big data analytical framework, and he has overseen the company's evolution from a taxi-hailing app into an app-based transportation platform that now serves over 500 million people, engaging almost 50 million drivers. Previously, he was a senior technology leader at Baidu. So let's just jump into this. I guess let me join you on your right side here. I think my mic will still work. Good. So now we have a facing this way panel. Great, thanks a lot. So we discussed over the last couple of days a number of questions that come to mind about the prospects of AI augmenting human intellect and abilities in various ways, and questions like how can human capabilities best be extended by AI technologies? What kinds of problem-solving challenges are best addressed via these kinds of collaborations? Let me start with Russ, just to throw that out to you.
So I've been very impressed by all of our discussions today and this morning and in the sessions leading up to it. AI is extremely exciting and extremely powerful. But if you happen to also have a domain of inquiry or a domain that you care about, and you have AI, it becomes incredibly exciting. And so, as Eric mentioned, I'm in medical research, biological research. We care about drugs, drug discovery, drug use, drug side effects. And there are a lot of unsolved problems in the pharmaceutical arena. And when you're focusing on a problem and then you're given this gift of these incredibly powerful technologies, things really clarify and say, I can now do things that I couldn't do before. So I think one of the great things is if you have something else you care about besides AI, it makes for a lot of electricity and a lot of combustibility in a good way. So I could go into more, but let me just summarize that these are hard problems that really matter, that if they're solved will benefit society, where you really have an expectation that the human expertise can be significantly augmented with what the computers are good at.
But just jumping from the abstract into something that might be hot and interesting and concrete. Give me an example from your own work that what comes to mind where, I'm almost thinking of your PhD work, but where the AI comes to life and really assists medical research.
We're trying to look at genetic data, DNA sequence, to try to figure out how does these 3 billion bases of DNA turn into the diversity of human phenotype, the variety of human life. And we know that in principle, the DNA contains almost all of the information, or all the information, and it is way too complicated of a problem for pure human cognition. Yet we have theories, and with a theory, you can then go test it with these algorithms that are now looking for patterns in the DNA that are way more subtle than we could ever perceive even with our visual system, even with the best visualizations. We're going to be hearing about visualizations, but this goes beyond visualization. And so I think understanding the human genome at the next level, AI technologies are a mandatory stop in that.
Right. And Justine, I know you as one of the most interdisciplinary folks in AI with a background in literature, linguistics, a double PhD in developmental and cognitive psychology. I know you have lots to say about human cognition and artificial intelligence and their join. What are your reflections on this topic?
I have to say, first of all, that I don't really like the term nor the concept of augmentation. I'm really uncomfortable with that. It seems like a very deficit way of treating people. And it also seems very unidimensional, as if the people stay constant and the technology stays constant, and we stick them together. And I don't think that's the case. Chris Manning said earlier that we don't only have human intelligence, we have social intelligence, and that our social intelligence is very important. And I think that's the example I'm going to start out with, because I read an article recently by Otor, who's a well-known economist, and he and other economists have shown, in fact, that it's the high cognition jobs that are decreasing with the advent of automation. And it's the high social skills jobs that are increasing. And in fact, if you hold everything else constant, people with high social skills are doing better now than they were doing before. And his interpretation of this is because complementarity, not augmentation, complementarity and coordination are a competitive advantage. And because of this, I find myself implementing systems that collaborate with and coordinate with people in a way where both agents, the human agent and the system agent, come away changed. And the example that I use most commonly is that I build socially aware systems. They're aware of the social universe. They know that in the same way water cooler talk actually increases productivity in a workplace, that a social infrastructure increases the efficacy of work. And so these systems sense, in fact, every 30 seconds, they assess the feelings of the person about the system. Not really feelings, because that sounds like an emotion, but the rapport bond between the person and the system. And then they automatically pick up on the things you're saying and the things you're doing with your body that indicate that you are or are not building rapport. And they reason about what they should do in order to make that rapport higher in order to improve collaboration in a task. And then they generate that, and they keep on doing that. And that's the kind of augmentation that I'd like to see. So we've been able to demonstrate that children who learn with tutors that have this socially aware aspect to them learn better, particularly amongst children who are in low-resource schools and who are called at-risk children because of the likelihood that they not learn in the schools they're in. We've shown that building virtual assistants with this kind of social awareness gets their human partners to reveal more about themselves in a way such that the virtual assistant can use that information to do a better job. And then in something maybe that comes the closest to the classic meaning of augmentation, we've demonstrated, and I think this was the first demonstration of this, that children with autism or Asperger's, teens with autism, high-functioning autism or Asperger's, who work with these systems subsequently show more social skills in interacting with other children. And that's the important thing. So there's a transfer effect. So these systems are actually doing what I would call, instead of augmentation, the kind of adaptive complementarity and coordination that leaves us all changed for the better.
I have to say that when you shared these ideas with me and these results a couple months ago when we met in Switzerland, I walked away thinking about my own strategies and what do I share personally with other people and how can I become better at this. So with that as framing, how might these technologies, if they become ubiquitous, let's say that the results that you have are actually shared and leveraged by education and other areas, how might they change society more broadly?
My hope is that these are systems that are going to remind us always of the importance of what it means to be human. That in some sense they're highlighting and raising up those skills that we care most about. The skills of relationship building, the things that we should never leave to AI, that is love and partnership. And the very fact that these systems concentrate on that, in some sense paradoxically, I don't think our hearts are stuck at a certain size. I think we can love, and the more we love more. The more relationships we build, the more relationships we build. And tools like this, if and I hope when they become ubiquitous, can remind us of that important infrastructure. They can increase the length of our utterances so that Twitter becomes a hard place to emit nasty things to say. For example, that you have to use a certain number of characters. You can't use under a certain number of characters. And I think these are the kinds of, I'm not referring to any particular examples, but I think that examples like these demonstrate to us the primordial importance of our social bonds. And when machines engage in them, rather than diminishing and dampening our ability to and our desire to, they can enhance and raise up those bonds amongst us, as well as our bonds with machines.
It's certainly a counterpoint to the rising concerns with these platforms and technologies and emboldened with AI. So moving to Fernanda, just to, you might say that building systems that can collaborate and complement and work in a mix of initiatives with people need to be understood by people. I know you've been focusing a lot of your energy and talent there. So tell us more about what you've been doing.
Yeah. So when we founded PAIR, the People Plus AI Research Initiative at Google, it was our attempt to bring design thinking and HCI to machine learning. And part of that was this realization that, machine learning experts had been focusing very specifically on things like accuracy, which meant there was a lot of progress in accuracy and recall and stuff like that, which is great, and that work needs to happen. However, when you start applying this technology to a lot of different domains, and when the stakes get higher in society, accuracy is necessary, but it's not enough. Right? And so you need to start designing systems with the end user in mind, or with the user task. Why is it that you're building the system? What is it that it's going to do? What are the implications? How do you evaluate how the system is doing, right? And a lot of this is going to be that dialogue between the system and the human that it's on the other side, or the humans that are on the other side. And so one of the things we care about a lot in PAIR is research around interpretability. And one of the exciting things that I've seen is when we talk about machine learning interpretability, there's a whole range of possibilities. And on the one side, we're talking about interpretability for machine learning experts and researchers, which is deeply needed and tends to be deeply technical. But there's a whole range of different kinds of users. So there's end user interpretability and explainability. And this is one of the things we've been looking at as well. Another thing that has been very interesting in this kind of dialogue that you have between the user and a machine learning system is looking at domains like healthcare. So in working with doctors, we started seeing that it's not enough to give them a number or to say, oh, this is the classification. I have a pathologist looking at a slide deciding, is there cancer here? Is there what grade of cancer? And it's not enough to just say yes or no. The pathology really needs to know, well, great, but why? Why do you think that this is Gleason 4 versus Gleason 3, which are different categories of potential cancer, right? And so we've been working with doctors to support not only trying to understand what the patient has, but what the patient does not have. So differential diagnosis. So you show the closest examples, but then you show why you thought that the other things were not pertinent. And so we've created a whole range of tools. For instance, another one of the things that doctors care deeply about is when they're looking at these images, they have very different dimensions of similarity that they care about. One of them is visual, another might be anatomical. So how do you support those different needs, right? So we created tools that allow the doctors to express high-level concepts they care about. So they might want to say, oh, okay, I'm looking at this patient. I want to see images like this, but with more fused glands. Fused glands, that's a concept. That's a high-level concept. How do you express that to the ML system so that the ML system can then traverse that massively high-dimensional space and look for that specific vector that the doctor cares about, right? And so a lot of what we've been doing, I like to think about as creating these very sophisticated flashlights that then the doctors or whatever other experts can start shining through these very high-dimensional, complicated spaces. And again, by doing this work, we are changing and we are influencing the kind of machine learning work that needs to happen and the kind of information seeking and surfacing that these systems need to do.
It's interesting, when Russ and I were in grad school together here at Stanford, we learned about a classic paper by Randy Teach. We found this very exotic, that doctors using expert systems of the day really were interested in rich explanations of the production rule chaining. And it seems, for a variety of reasons, and that was considered one of them, that there hasn't been a translation of these technologies as much as they could have flowed into medicine. Do you think that's true, Russ? Is this a barrier, the ability of these systems to explain themselves in clinical medicine?
Yes, and as many of us know, some of the most powerful algorithms in terms of predictive power are some of the most difficult to understand, and this creates a real user interface problem for professionals, especially when they're professionals and they're taking professional responsibility for a decision. The black box aspect, I think it's clear that they're willing to give up some performance in exchange for explainability. In fact, I've heard of cases where they use the neural net to make the prediction, and then they use Bayesian logic to explain it. Even though the Bayesian logic wasn't used to make the prediction, it's better at doing the explanation. You can think about that and decide what you think. But this is an acute problem in medicine. And there's some arguments that, well, this is just during a phase of transition, but once we get to trust these tools, we won't be asking for the explanation any longer. I think that's very unlikely. It's also very dangerous because as knowledge improves, these systems have to change their decisions in response.
So speaking of needing augmentation, I remember in 1999, I was visiting, or 2000, I was visiting our lab, Microsoft Research Lab in Beijing. And after trying to get around with taxis for a while, I thought to myself, boy, if I just had speech-to-speech translation, and if the car simply, through collaborative filtering, knew where I wanted to go by where I'm coming from and how I look, that would be good enough for now. And I know that with the Uber economy, I'll use that word right now, things have really moved quickly. So I'm really curious to hear your point of view, Bob, about leveraging AI to augment human beings or to complement them, depending on whether you're Justine or not.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. And in my opinion, AI technology enhances human in decision making because AI has better memories, better computations capability, and human is better at, for example, emotion and empathy, diversity, flexibility, and so on. And I can give you a very good example in DD. And every day there are more than 2 million phone calls to ask DD for advices from drivers and passengers. And we have about 14 employees working on that to deal with these advices and problem. And we are using AI technology to reduce the time cost for every call. For example, if a passenger is waiting on the line, the system will ask the driver to describe his or her problem. And we are using voice recognition, NLP, knowledge graph, to analyze the requirement. And then before the staff pick up the phone, we already know the requirement and the answer. So the job of staff is to make the driver calm down to do a good communication with the anxious driver, which AI is not suitable to do that. And after the conversation, AI will produce a summary automatically, and the staff just make confirmation or make some little modification. And this data is very valuable to improve AI algorithm for the future. So that is a very good example how AI system and human system can work together to make a better value for human. I think just like Justine just described, that is two equal agency. One is AI agency, which is suitable to deal with logical things, and one is human agency, which is suitable to deal with emotional things. And these two agencies work together to make better value. So that is my point. Thank you.
Thank you. I've thought to myself in working in this area over the years, I found that there has been such fabulous work in psychology. For example, the work by a Stanford emeritus professor, Herb Clark, on communication between human beings, how they ground their language. Other work that really reads on or provides blueprints for what we do in thinking through human AI complementarity and engagement. So I just want to get you all to reflect a little bit about what are some key research directions moving ahead with building AI systems that are really aimed at extending, enhancing, supporting, nurturing human beings in the tasks that they do. What are some key technical, social, societal challenges we need to address to really get to the next level of what we might call fluid collaboration or engagement? Justine.
So there are technical challenges. A lot of the really interesting phenomena in communication between people are sparse. It's essential. It's essential to work, and yet it doesn't occur all that often. And we talk so often about big data, but these are small data. And we need to be developing the kinds of techniques that can deal with these super important phenomena that are nevertheless never going to find a million instances. We're never going to find a million.
Can I interrupt you? I noticed you were gesturing just now.
Yes, right.
And I first knew of your work by the rhythm of the gesture and how important that was. Can you tell people about that a little bit in terms of human AI story?
Sure. We gesture, all of us, even when we think we don't. I once carried out a study in the UK, and this gentleman said to me after the experiment was over and I was debriefing him, he said, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry. I never gesture." And I brought him back into the room and showed him the video of himself gesturing, just like everybody else. And it turns out that it's thought to be a sign of being poorly brought up to gesture. It doesn't stop anybody, it just makes them deny the fact that they gesture. And in the very beginning of my work in AI, I was interested in the relationship between our nonverbal behaviors and our language, and how those gave us a way of triangulating on intention. And I'm still interested in that. These days, I've kind of segued a little bit, and you can see why I worked on gesture. I once got thrown out of a restaurant because I was explaining the Niagara Falls to a non-native speaker of English, and the fork flew off my plate as I drew the falls and flew over my dining partner's head into the shirt of the man behind him. And the restaurant owners didn't appreciate it and did not believe that it was a mistake. That was the end of what looked to be a nice evening at the beginning. Anyway, if we think about phenomena like this, we are so multi-channel, multi-function. We're never just following one single functionality. That is, we're perceiving the language of the other person. We're perceiving their social behavior. We're following a task. And one of the things that I love about Herb Clark's joint action theory is that it's a way of moving past us as individuals. I mean, you know, we talked a lot, and I wanted to jump up and say this morning, but now that I've got a microphone on, I'll say it now.
Go for it.
So we talk a lot about John McCarthy when he was young faculty at Dartmouth, and he invited all these people in 56 to these summer workshops to talk about what was going to be AI. And they didn't call it cybernetics because that belonged to somebody else. And they were all mathematicians, and they were all men. And it had a tremendous impact on the field. And their goal was autonomy, to build systems that were autonomous. What we talk about a lot less often is the fact that between 43 and 52, well before these Dartmouth summer workshops. There were a series of lectures in New York called the Macy Lectures. And the Macy Lectures invited some mathematicians, it's true, but they also invited anthropologists and sociologists and psychologists, literary theorists. Margaret Mead was there. Her husband, Gregory Bateson, who was a critical theory person. A number of really well-known people across the spectrum looking at exactly those same problems. And the answer they came up with was that we needed a model of interdependence between humans and machines. And isn't it funny that we're coming back around to that origin story of AI that actually was before the origin story that we tend to believe? And I really do see us coming back to that multidisciplinary story of where AI came from, which was interdependence and not autonomy, because we're not autonomous. And the thing I like about the Herb Clark, just to kind of pop back to that, the thing I like about this Herb Clark theory of joint action is that you can consider the dyad as a single unit of analysis. So you and I, we are one unit of analysis. That's a wonderful problem. It's tough. It's really hard to analyze two people as one unit. And yet it's the truth. It's the way the world works. And if we want to build robots that don't step on and kill the people they work with in factories, if we want cars that understand our intentions, we're going to have to learn how to build an AI that can deal with joint action, that can deal with these dyadic units, these pairs of people and machines.
Thank you. So Fernanda, what's your sense for the role of understanding and models of human cognition and even notions of artistry in machines that can collaborate with people?
So I want to come back
sure.
to
please feel free to comment on anything that
one of the
Justine
things
said.
that Justine was talking about, which is you need to understand this as a dyad, as a relationship, right? And I think for us to actually progress in that direction, and I'm totally going to be biased here and talk about my part of the world, but which is I think we need to broaden the conversation around AI. AI today is very much behind a wall of math and equations, and it's very hard, and it's just kind of elite to be able to penetrate that world. And I think we miss so far tools and artifacts that can start to translate that math into a language that other people can start to engage with. And I'm not talking about dumbing down anything. I'm talking about creating tools that actually allow you to test, probe, understand trade-offs. And so one of the things we've been working on is how do you create small simulations or small interactive experiences where engineers can work with them, but so can policymakers, and so can students, and so can designers, and so can UXers, right? And that has turned out to be really important. And so, for instance, one of the things we did in Pair is we created this, from a data visualization simulation perspective, very simple little simulation of different metrics of machine learning fairness. And we just put it online. And we're like, maybe people will look at this, maybe they won't. And it went viral. And it was just this thing that, imagine you are a bank and you're trying to give loans and you have multiple populations with different distributions. How do you decide how can you be fair to both different populations? And we had literally a bunch of definitions of fairness that had been brought up in the academic literature. And that, again, when you talk about the inner workings of that, that's a lot of math, right? But we created an interactive visualization that could allow you to play with those things and very clearly see the implications. That went viral. And we started getting a lot of inquiries. So for instance, criminal justice department got in touch with us and said, hey, do you think we could build something like this? Where for our own department, we can see the difference, different kinds of trade-offs in the decisions we make or in how we decide to measure justice. And so I really feel like, and any time I have talked to policymakers about machine learning and AI, having these very concrete experiences that simulate, that try to explain to you, this is what's happening, this is what training looks like, this is what mistakes look like, this is what the limitations of this technology behave like and feel like. That has been a really constructive conversation to have. And you just can feel the temperature in the room going from adversarial and I don't trust this technology to like, oh, okay, tell me more. I need to know about these limitations. I need to understand, okay, so do we need to go back to the data? Do we need to have, and granted, this dialogue is not always going to be about only technical things, but I really believe that broadening the conversation around these more technical trade-offs will just lift everybody, will just lift the conversation. I remember actually talking to someone who does a lot of activism, Joy Bulamini from the Media Lab. And I asked Joy, I said, Joy, what is the biggest challenge you have when you're, when you're going around to different governments? She's like, AI literacy. It's really a huge challenge. So I just wanted
Fabulous. I should mention, you mentioned John McCarthy and why that name was picked. At the 50th anniversary of the 1956 meeting at Dartmouth, we asked John McCarthy about that name, artificial intelligence, and he looked at us and he said, my main goal was to put the flag on the pole of what we were talking about. That was his quote. So he had kind of a different vision, which really expressed the notion we were going to try to do something different and new. Russ, go ahead.
I just want these last two comments about the dyad as the unit and about the AI literacy. It comes to mind because we've used, you've opened up the Pandora's box of not liking words. You didn't like augmented. I worry about the word collaboration when we're talking about AI systems. When I have a collaboration academically, that's supposed to send a signal of we are co-equals, we're both going to get something out of this. You and I have collaborated. It was great. I loved it. We wrote a paper. And hopefully we were serving all of our interests. It is not, I think there's a legitimate area of research as to both the language and the reality surrounding what should be the relationship between the human and the AI system, that dyad. It may be that collaboration is not the right model and is not the model that you want to put out into the public. It may be it's all about helping the human do their job better, and the AI system kind of happily, because it can be happy, just flip the happy button, because the AI's happiness is not that important, and we're really just trying to get the human to perform whatever task they're trying to perform better. So I would question, like, just even saying collaboration, I think, is imposing a bunch of assumptions about the relationship that we might want to examine critically.
We should examine them.
Yes, I was going to say, I'll remember that both of you didn't like words very much, so some certain words.
Yeah.
Bob?
I think this is a very good question. And in my opinion, AI is a new force of productivity, like electricity. It can give life. It also can kill life. And so only human can make value-related decision. The AI is a tool. It has to do good to human society. I'll give you a very simple example in Didi scenario. When in the peak hour, always there is less vehicle than demand. And in Didi, we have a surge price system, which means if you can afford higher fee, you can go faster than others. Last year, we have a very fierce debate on that. Is it fair for everybody? And is it fair for maybe someone who is not rich and maybe he has to wait a very long time in the queue. So last year, we launched a new product that is a queue system. And in the cheapest car type, we say it X-Price service. And that is a first in, first out system. That is, if you first in this queue, you can be the first to get the vehicle. And then we use AI technology to give suggestion to the persons in the queue. For example, if there is a premier service nearby, you can pay maybe 10% higher, and then you can go immediately. We give you suggestion, and you made the decision for that. And then we have the dynamic pricing system in premier service and the luxury service. So that is the value we chose to do. So AI itself cannot do decision like that. Human has to do that. We have to think what is good for our society, which is very, very important.
Thank you. So I'd like you to all imagine it's the year 2050. What will be commonplace, powerful, I'm assuming, and valuable? Human-AI collaborations, maybe by then.
Well, the alternative model is that we're not thinking of it as a human-AI collaboration. We're thinking about a bunch of human achievements that are more fair, more efficient, more effective, better among any set of definitions of better, where the AI is facilitating it and is in the background. So, again, the collaboration word, the reason I don't like it is it makes the AI more up and
let's pull back from collaboration.
I don't think that's what you...
So tell me about the hospital experience in 30 years from now.
So we saw...
What's AI doing to augment physicians?
Right. So Serena showed us some amazing videos, those blue shadowy figures. You couldn't have done that, but that was just spectacular. But imagine first of all, we don't really want to be in hospitals. So a huge win for AI would be hospitals are no longer necessary. And that's a serious thing, because if you have an agent at home watching your elderly parent, making sure that the activity levels are appropriate, that the eating is appropriate, that there's no falls, that there's secondary indicators of mood, and you can send in humans when appropriate for companionship, for very human interaction, and for delivering meds and for changing dressings and all those things. You can imagine a distributed healthcare system, which is really what almost everybody wants. And so really a huge win for AI would be hospitals are no longer necessary. And I don't think that's a crazy, crazy idea.
Other thoughts on this question?
I have a different view of the hospital. First of all, I have a very...
not that question, but sure.
I have a different view of collaboration.
Save one for you.
Thanks. But there's not going to be anybody to take care of me in it. First of all, I just have to talk about collaboration. And I think it has to do with the hospital, too. I had a kind of a meta education. And so I don't think these things should be transparent. I don't think that they should ever disappear into the background. I think we learn from interacting with them, and they learn from interacting with us. That is machine learning at its most basic. That's the adaptive system. And so when you say that collaboration doesn't work because it's just there to help us, we can make it that way, but I think we'd lose something in the process. We'd lose our ability to learn how it works. And we'd lose its ability to learn how we work. And that's really what I mean by collaboration. And I think I hope that that will still be important in that hospital in 2030.
2050 we're talking about, 30 years from now. So Fernanda?
2050 even.
So I have there are two domains. Well, they're huge, but I really hope we make a ton of progress in them. One is education, and several people before us today have talked about just the ability to have tutors and to have tailored education. I think is incredible. Another thing that we're starting to see that I'm very excited about is moments when we learn from the AI systems that we're building. And because we can learn what they've learned, we become better. So I'll give you an example. We worked with an earthquake scientist, an earth scientist, last year who spent a sabbatical with us, and he was looking at aftershock predictions. And incredibly complicated problem. I'm sure anyone who lives in California somewhat familiar with this. And these are the kinds of computations that take place in high-performance computing, HPC, right? And computations that run for weeks. And so this scientist started experimenting with very simple neural nets. Very simple. Like, they were so simple you could count the neurons, like 70 neurons.
Some very smart animals have that few neurons.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
The network starts performing in parity with these HPC systems, which, by the way, take, again, weeks to run. And the network was doing just as good a job, and the scientist could go and immediately try new things, right? So if nothing else, it became much more efficient because you can try things much, much faster. It turns out the system started doing better than just the classical understanding of aftershock prediction for where the location of aftershocks. So we got a gain in accuracy, which was great. But then the bonus, and this to me is the most inspiring piece of this whole thing, is that then the earth scientist, the professor, looked at the results and was able to interpret the physics of it. So there was something about the earth physics that the neural network figured out that we had not been able to figure out to this day. All right? And so this opened up a whole series of theoretical pathways, right? And so that's my hope also, in addition to all the wonderful things, is that we can become better scientists. We can hopefully become better doctors. We can become, and so, yes.
I agree with you. It's such a beautiful example because in a strange way, it's the merging of error analysis for machine learning with domain knowledge.
Domain knowledge, for sure,
and
yes.
my group and I, my students and I spend a lot of time thinking about how to bring together a bottom-up machine learning approach with a top-down domain knowledge approach, especially in sparse domains like social awareness. How do we do that? And I think you're giving an example of a place where domain knowledge can grow through the bottom up so that the top down and the bottom up really are working together in a very interesting way.
Great. Let's open it up to the audience now for any kind of questions or comments on anything you've heard or your thoughts about human and machines working together. We have a microphone out there. And
so I think we may have been in medical school together, Dr. Altman. So question for you about the way we currently use our medical record. It doesn't really, it's for documentation, regulatory, it's not really for data collection for the purposes of research. So how do you envision that could be improved upon in a center like this? We should have the tools to really capture data, to guide decision-making much more effectively.
So you're absolutely right. The medical record is it's a tool for billing, it's a tool for administrative tracking, and and doctors have reminders to themselves, and all clinicians have reminders to themselves and to others about what they did and why. So it also has a legal standing. It does, it turned out, have a lot of very interesting and powerful secondary uses for discovery. My colleague Nigam Shah, who's here today, has done work. We've done a little bit of work in this area. I did a counterpoint editorial about 10 years ago where it was like, is the electronic medical record a gold mine or a tangled mess? And the answer is it is both. But it is a great challenge for AI because there's a sense that, especially as you get tens of millions of records that are federated together and available, perhaps with appropriate encryption and privacy safeguards, there's an idea that there's going to be huge amounts of bias, huge amounts of noise, huge problems with missing data. Those are all the headaches. But that there's probably in there amazingly valuable clinical gems about, oh, we never realized it, but this is the right way to treat patients, and this is the wrong way to treat patients. So it's an active area where deep neural networks and other techniques are being just baby steps, like how do we represent a patient and dealing with those noise, bias, and missing data issues. You can also imagine a world where the collection of that data becomes much more systematic because we now have the ability to capture more, both with sensors, with better capture of the clinical encounters, better measuring of the physiology. So the amount of missingness, the amount of noise, the amount of bias in the measurements goes down. And then you're really off to the races because then you might be able to do major discoveries and major actions based on those discoveries. So I'm optimistic about that, but it's going to be a long road, especially, unfortunately, in the United States, where we have the most fractured healthcare system. I will just leave it at there are other places in the world with more homogeneous records, homogeneous systems, where this is likely to happen first.
And per Serena's talk, you can imagine records changing dramatically in what they're encoding,
right?
Videos and so on. Other questions? Yeah.
Thank you for the insightful discussion today. This is Lamia Youssef from Stanford University. And in the previous panel, we talked about regulating and governing AI and machine learning. And here we're talking about interoperability and being able to understand the different machine learning models. And many machine learning engineers don't even understand what the model is doing, the one that they developed themselves. How do we put together these two ideas, and how do we develop interdependence between humans and machine learning models if we don't understand what they are doing?
Yeah, so I think interpretability is going to be a key. To me, it's a key piece of this puzzle, right? And as I was saying, I think there are different approaches to interpretability, ranging from the very, very technical piece all the way to end users who also need explainability sometimes. And it's really interesting. I think the community is starting to be somewhat critical, even of the interpretability approaches. So for instance, one of the things that is very well known are, for image recognition are things like sensitivity maps. And it turns out that you can kind of project whatever you want onto them as a human, as a viewer, right? So it's very unclear.
Modern Rorschach, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So it's very unclear how much those are adding to real interpretability. One of the areas I'm very excited about is the notion of the ability to probe these systems, even as black box systems, and trying to understand, as I was saying, even at a high level, if we can come up with ways that we can start to express these probing capabilities in high-level concepts that we as humans understand, then I think we have a better chance of trying to understand how they are behaving and how they may fail. Other things that I think are incredibly powerful are things like counterfactuals, and let me qualify counterfactuals here. So they are not perfect.
Why don't you define what that means?
Yes, yeah. So for instance, we have a tool we put out that allows you to do things like, again, imagine you are a bank and you are deciding who to give a loan to. And you pick up a person and you say, okay, this person did not get a loan from me. Okay, these are their demographics and all the information I have about them. All right, now system, give me the closest person to this one that did get a loan, and show me their characteristics, right? And so there you can start to see very clearly the delta between these two people. And again, this is not perfect interpretability, but it's a very powerful way to start articulating things like, maybe there's bias here. Maybe this is a problem, right? If things like the only thing that changed is the gender, or the zip code, whatever it is, you as a human should start to have real misgivings about such a system, right? And I feel like this is a lot of the work that's actively happening.
And don't you think that beyond probing a black box or even a lit up box that shows you various functions or weights, that we're really whistling in the wind until we get to causation and have AI systems actually provide us with causal information? What's causing this to be the case?
Yeah.
Comments from the panel on causal induction and the fact that we've made very little progress there. And the hope moving forward. Russ, you already...
This has come up today several times already, and I think you have to tread extremely carefully because this is a well-known, hard enterprise. But I do think, you know, the analogy in medicine is the randomized controlled trial, where we believe that if we control everything else and just vary this one thing, and there's a difference, that proves causation. And so there is a track record of doing causal reasoning there, and I think it's an important area to expand in AI research, because I think people are going to ask this causation correlation question all the time. It's going to be key to the explanations. Right. And so you're going to be able to have to posit causal chains, and then you're going to have to be able to prove them or at least show their plausibility. So it's a key area that can't be ignored.
Next audience question. We have an expert here.
I have two questions. A lot of the conversation about the use of AI in medicine tends to talk about the algorithm and the doctor, but we tend to leave out the patient in the conversation. And it's a little bit complicated because it's not just a dyad, it's a triad. And given health care, there's also the algorithm and the patient might remain fixed. The doctors keep changing. Because in a chronic condition situation, you're seeing 6, 7, 8 specialists. And there's no one doctor who knows the patient. So the question is around, how do you manage a situation where it's not a two-party enterprise, but a multi-party enterprise? So that's question one. Question two is, we don't trust anybody with our medical data. Not the government, not our insurer, not our employer. So how are we going to train our AI?
The insurer and the employer have all the data, whether or not we trust them. The government may not.
Any answers to Nico? I was thinking we should ask Michael Bernstein to help us.
This is a multi-agent. It's a great multi-agent question with competing motivations. In the great session this morning, we heard about children and their motivations and their reward systems. And that's where I think a lot of the issues here, because the patient has a very different reward structure than the physician and the AI system and the payers. So this is a true multi-agent decision-making system.
But great questions. We should get to take them offline at the break and beyond. Last audience question.
Hey, thanks so much. My name's Alex. I'm a CS PhD student here. I had a question for Bob. So even within the US, there's like really great diversity in the degree to which different people like to relate to technology. Some people, you know, love it, and some people are much more cautious. And I'm curious what your experience has been, you know, navigating, you know, not just China, but what you think the differences are in the way that people relate to technology in China versus the US, and if you could elaborate a bit on that.
Yeah, that's a very good question. First of all, we don't launch service in US, but we launch services in Brazil, Mexico, Australia, and Japan, and New Zealand, and other countries as well. We say the fundamental requirement is similar. For example, for a passenger, when they want to go to another place, first of all, we should have a vehicle to pick this person up. And the second, they want to as cheap as possible. They want the quality of service not too bad. There is no abnormal behavior. That is, that is to say, we don't want the driver to provide a very deeper service. Just drive to the destination very safely, very quietly, and that's all. So we say the fundamental requirement is the same, but every country has different. For example, in Brazil, we have to focus on the safety because the safety environment is very bad. And the most dangerous scenario is when a passenger get on the car and take out a gun and give me your cash to the driver. How to solve that problem? That is very specific in Brazil. Thank you.
Great. Wow. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Fernanda, Justine, Russ, Bob.